This is the Chat City interviews from 103.2 Preston FM with your host, Huey Parr.
We are on a Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. through to noon. It's the voice of Preston and South Ribble, Chat City, your morning magazine show. And right now, it's nice to welcome my second guest on the programme this morning into the studio, and it's Maureen Chadwick. And Maureen is an independent diabetes nurse. So Maureen, lovely to meet you again.
Nice to be here. Nice to see you again as well, Huey.
And we've got a few questions that have come through social media, and some questions that have come into us at the studio around diabetes. And should we kick off with some of them that people have sent in? Some of the questions. I mean, the first one is really quite an interesting one from Antonella Muscat, and it says, how do you manage patients who are non-compliant, and is there any role for motivational work with such people?
Yeah, it is a very good question, and could end up being quite complex. But usually on a face-to-face, when you meet patients and you talk to them, you actually get to find out what it is that does motivate them. And usually if they are non-compliant, it's usually because they've actually got worn down with the routine of having to stick with it. Because if you think about it, they live with the diabetes 24 hours 7 days a week, whereas I just visit as and when I see them. So it is difficult. It's like when you get on a diet, you start a diet and then sooner or later you'll come off the diet and then you start on it later on. And it's very much the same as somebody who has got diabetes, because if you think about it, they are a human being. They're not, and everybody is different, and how they accept it, take it on board and move forward with it. A role for motivational work with such people, yes, it's a good idea. I do know that when earlier on in my career, when I worked with children, that if we were having problems with, say, teenagers or people coming to terms, young children with sort of like type 1 diabetes who were coming to terms with the diabetes and unable to stick with it, that we used to refer them, and everybody gets a bit spooked by this, but we used to refer them onto a clinical psychologist who basically their role is to look at behaviour and methods of which to change that behaviour so that they can move forward and be, now this is going to sound really sort of like prescriptive, I don't mean it in that way, but so that they can continue in the way that they should be continuing to keep themselves safe and to make sure the diabetes is well controlled. But yeah, motivational workshops, if you could get them there, probably sounds like a really good idea.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And just before we ask some of the other questions that we've got here, just tell us a little about what is diabetes and what are often the symptoms?
Diabetes is a metabolic disorder, basically, and it's all around the way that we take in food, digest it, and then once it's digested, how the body then disseminates all the different parts of the food that we've eaten, nutrients, minerals, etc. But within diabetes, what we're looking at is how you metabolize energy, and that is what the carbohydrate or starch or sugar or glucose or whatever you want to call it, that is what it's used for. And it's a case of the insulin connecting with the sugar, taking it to cellular level, and that turns it into energy, because the chemical interaction of that entering the cell and into the nucleus of the cell creates a big bang, basically, and then creates energy for us to carry on with things that we do automatically without thinking, such as thinking, breathing, heart beating, the everyday kind of thing. So if you with type 1 diabetes, the insulin then stops being produced, as you can imagine, the body then has toxins within the body and has no way, which is the byproduct of its own body, of your own body trying to turn muscle or fat into sugar so that you can actually have energy. And that then lets off a byproduct which is called ketones, which is very toxic and dangerous to the body. So those are the ones without the insulin. With type 2 diabetes, it's a case of, as you get older, your body gets worn out and your shape changes, so your body becomes resistant to the insulin because the cells have changed as well. Signs and symptoms, if you were to, and I always say this with caution, because you can have a cold or an infection and you can get thirsty and you can go to the toilet a lot because you are thirsty, which is what you would expect if you're drinking a lot. You can get blurred vision. You can, with type 1 diabetes, usually people lose weight very, very quickly. Type 2 diabetes, what you might find is, in this country, we're very fortunate in the fact that we have a system in place that's put in place by Lancashire County Council for the 40 and 70-year-old check at the GP, which is then screening for anything with any kind of chronic disease management. So you may get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes sooner than it's come out full blown. But the usual symptoms are going to the toilet a lot, drinking a lot, losing weight, feeling very, very tired, hungry. You get a massive sort of like food, because the body's wanting to turn the sugar into energy. So you may be that you've had a really good meal, but you're absolutely starving after you've had the meal. Now, these can also be other signs and symptoms of other things. But if you are concerned and you are worried about anything at all, then by all means go to your GP, ask for a blood test, and they will be able to tell you and put your mind at rest.
Right. And we'll go back to a motivational question in a moment, but that's interesting in what you were just saying, because we've had a message come through from Anne, who lives in Kirkham. And Anne is concerned that she's, I don't have an age, but Anne says she's constantly falling asleep, and that her own mother had diabetes as a child. And Anne says that she just falls asleep constantly and worries about, could that be a sign of diabetes? And does diabetes run within families?
It can run within families. I have my mother and all her siblings, they've all got type 2 diabetes, and my father's got type 2 diabetes, but they've got it at a bigger age, so it's come with progression. So I'm very much aware that I have to keep an eye on myself in case I at some point am diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Apologies, what's the lady's name? Anne. If Anne is really concerned, if you're really concerned, Anne, and it would put your mind at rest, it's nothing to worry about whatsoever. Just go to your GP, your doctor. They will do a simple blood test. And I know that sounds horrendous because nobody likes having blood taken, but it is as simple as that. It will be a fasting blood test to make sure because they'll check for other things as well. And that way they can come back and sit in front of you and say, yes, it's this, or no, it's that. Okay.
Right, thank you for that. And just back to the motivation, you were talking about motivation just a short time ago. And from Disability Equality Northwest, how do people motivate themselves to keep up the regime kind of healthy eating, medical checks and blood sugars?
You'd be actually really quite surprised. People, I think we come from a society that if we're told to do something, we do tend to do it. So if you then go and visit, and it is quite worrying, and diabetes is very much in the press. It's not something that's hidden or people don't talk about or don't know about it. And if you say to somebody, if I was to say to somebody, I'm a diabetes specialist nurse, oh, I know such a body, they've got diabetes. So it's very much in the forefront. And because it is so big an issue and there are so many people that do have it, if you go to your doctor and you get diagnosed, people, it's the same as with anything. You don't want to go against. It's an old-fashioned way, but if the doctor says I've got this and you've got to do this, you tend to do it. It is very difficult, and I really do have a lot of praise for people who have got diabetes, because it must be so difficult. Because as I was saying to you before we came on air, it is a 24-hour, 7 days a week condition, and you can't just put it down and forget about it because it is always there. The people that tend to actually, the biggest bit is at the very beginning, and it's the actual acceptance of the diabetes. Yes, I've got diabetes, but I've also got a life and I'm going to get on with my life, and diabetes will just have to come along with it. That sounds very flippant. It's not meant to be, because there's only simple rules that you have to follow, and the simple rule are that you have 3 meals a day, you go no longer than 4 to 5 hours between those meals, that you eat a healthy diet, which all of us are supposed to eat a healthy diet. So information that's given to somebody who's got type 2 diabetes or even type 1 diabetes, they're not really being told to do anything other than what you would be told as a person anyway, because it's all part of normal daily living. Some people do find it hard to be motivated, and I've had to be a bit of and some people are very much afraid of going to the doctors or going to see the practice nurse, because they're actually frightened of being told off. Because sometimes people have this view when they have got some kind of condition or something wrong with them, that they're actually doing all the tests, that they're actually sticking to the diet or they're sticking to this, all because for the doctor or for the nurse. What people don't seem to understand is that we haven't got the diabetes. It's the diabetes belongs to them and it's their condition. So they lose heart and motivation, and then get a bit worried about actually coming into the doctors because they have actually been non-compliant. But we accept that because you're a human being, and even me, with the best will in the world, if I was told to do something, I would do it for so long, and I know that I would slip off and then come back again.
Yes.
This week I've been really, really fortunate. Somebody who was diagnosed, I'm not quite sure when they were diagnosed, but they were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it was a big wake-up call for them. And they actually did a guest blog on for, and I know this sounds a bit promotional, it's not meant to be, but they did a guest blog on my website and tells you all about it. And it's really good. There's some parts of it that have written that are sort of like myths and beliefs within diabetes and the general public, which is really good because it shows how real it is. But what is really good about the blog is at the end of it, he says, yes, you're going to do this and yes, you're going to do that. But at the end of the day, remember, you are a human being. So you are going to slip off. But it is really good, and it's definitely worth going to have a read.
Right, brilliant. And just quickly, and we'll ask again at the end, what is the website address?
The website is www.diabetescompletecareuk.com.
Okay, and we'll mention it again. And Denise Fletcher from Fulwood asks, why do diabetics need to pay attention to their feet?
Right, the reason for that is if you it's common sense, and that's how I see diabetes, a very much common sense condition. If you think of your blood running through your body, because I like to be visual, so think of all the veins and the arteries running through your body, and as they're going through right down to your toes, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so they're basically finer than hair. And you've got a blood sugar that's running higher than what it should be. The normal blood sugar is between 3.5 and 5.5. But say you've got a blood sugar of running at 10. So your blood sugar's running at 10. Basically, you've got syrup running through your through in your bloodstream. So what happens is if your blood sugar is really high, then your body can't mend any problems that you may be having, such as you stubbed your toe, so you've got nerve endings that have had a problem with, or you've had a bang and you've got a bruise. So the healing takes longer to happen. So why we're so I don't know, twitched about your feet is because it's also connected very much to the eyes, because the vessels at the back of the eye are very much the same vessels that are in your feet and also in your kidneys. So we're really, really concerned, because if we start seeing problems or any complications, early signs of complications in your feet, then we also need to check your eyes and we also need to check your kidneys, because something might be going on there as well. So that's the reason why we're really worried about feet. We all take our feet for granted, but there's and I don't like doing this, but there's like horrific stories of people who haven't looked after the feet, and podiatrists are brilliant at this, where they've been walking around in the barefoot and they've got something in the foot, but because they've had the diabetes for a long time and they haven't perhaps looked after themselves as well, that they've lost the feeling or sensations within the feet. So if you and I were to stub our toe or we were to tread on a nail, we would know, right, straight away, before we'd even done any damage. Somebody who's got diabetes, if they've lost the sensation within their feet, so no nerve endings are working, and you tread on a nail, you will tread on a nail and walk around with that nail, which then creates complications, because then you get ulceration and all the other problems that go with it. So that is why we drum it into patients. Well, that sounds awful, but we're sort of great advocates to patients, because we don't want people to lose toes, we don't want people to lose part of the foot, and I could go on, because it doesn't sound really good on radio. It sounds a bit horrific, and I don't want to frighten people. But that is why that we are so concerned about people paying attention. And we do suggest that every night, that when they go to bed, that when they take the tights or their socks or shoes off, that they actually check their feet, just brief quickly over, just to make sure that they're okay and that they're feeling sensations. And at their annual review, we do a foot check to make sure that your feet are actually fine. And we also we check the feet, and we also, and it's gone out my head, we do that once a year when we do the annual review. And if we do ask questions like, do you have any funny sensations? And it's all part of the process to make sure that we don't get any problems.
Right, thank you for that. And Alan has contacted us here, and he says, a fairly active 68 years old male, exercise regularly, like to scuba dive. Wow, well done. With one of two sons and two of his sons. And he says, I'm looking to decrease my glucose numbers so to live healthy and long time in the future. He's been married twice. He tells us lots. Wants divorce. And he doesn't like ending relationships. He said, I've been living with diabetes since the age of 45. Until recently, I was able to charge through and remain okay. And now it seems I've got to find a way through. I was first diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, as he said, at age 45. And what he's saying at the moment is, I'm not controlling my sugars as well as I like to. Have you got an opinion on that? And should he start thinking of maybe surrendering to using insulin?
Oh, bless. Right. Alan, you sound like a wowzer. Yes, you sound great.
Scuba diving.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely brilliant. So it obviously hasn't interfered with your life. What I would suggest that you do, if you really, really are concerned, as long as you've got some blood sugars to take with you when you next go for your diabetes review, because you will know when that is, or make a specific appointment yourself to see somebody regarding your diabetes and discuss these things that you're worrying about. It may be that they're running just a tiny bit. If you've noticed that your blood sugars are rising over a 3-day period, it could be that you could be coming down with something like a cough or a cold, because people who've got type 1 diabetes and other people with diabetes who check their blood sugars find that if they check them for 3 days, they can actually, the same as somebody who hasn't got diabetes, that because of corticosteroids, your blood sugars start to rise, and then 3 days later you come out with a flu or cough or cold or something. So it could be like that, an underlying infection. It sounds to me as if you need to talk to somebody face to face about what your fears are, what your concerns and what your worries are. And the health professional will make the decision about, in discussion with you, because it's all about you and all about agreed care planning, because at the end of the day, it's about you, not about us, the health professional. And they will say to you what's the best way forward for it. Because I can't see you and I'm not face to face with you,
yes,
and can't look at other issues that I would probably ask or pick up on. I'm not going to say on here, yes, you do, or no, you don't. You actually need to sit whoever it is that looks after your care and discuss what your concerns and worries are, and they will tell you. You will still be remaining as type 2 diabetes. There's this misconception that if you've got type 2 diabetes and you go onto insulin, that you now have type 1. If you've got type 2 diabetes and you've gone onto insulin, you're type 2 diabetes controlled by insulin. But there are other ways of actually controlling it other than going straight onto insulin. So speak to your health professional, Alan, and all the best.
That's right, and enjoy the scuba diving.
Yeah.
I think we've just time for a couple more. What about one from Janie? And Janie says, please can you tell me if I need to have my, well, we've talked about feet, so that's okay. It's I'm newly diagnosed type 2 and I have been asked to go for a day's education. What does this entail, and will I need tablets straight away?
Right, I can't say about whether you need tablets straight away or not, because at the end of the day, I'm not your health professional and I can't see you and I don't have all the facts in front of me. What usually happens is when somebody's newly diagnosed, especially if, like you've said, that you're not too bad at the moment, what usually happens is that we allow you to change your behaviour as such. So say if you're missing breakfast, we may say to you, reintroduce breakfast, have your lunch and have your evening meal. So you have like a regime going on, so it gets you back into having a healthy living lifestyle. So that's what it is. The day's education, because you haven't named it, there are some accredited named education things that we have. One of them's called Desmond. You may have heard of Desmond, which is for type 2 diabetes, which is a 1 day's education event. Now, all that it will basically entail for you to do is for you to turn up on the day. I used to actually deliver Desmond and I used to actually really enjoy it. I used to have really good fun with it. Usually what happens in the morning is that they go through with you. You actually end up telling your story about your diabetes, and from the group that you're with, because it's a group learning session, you actually learn from each other, and there's games and all sorts of things to do. So don't be put up with the fact that you're going as a group. Don't be put off by the fact that it's education, because it actually isn't as boring as you think it's going to be. It's not PowerPoint, it's more interaction, and it can be fun. And if you can take somebody with you to support you, then that's all the better, because what you miss out on, the other person will pick up on, and then you know you've got the support to talk to somebody if you need to.
Right, lovely. And a few questions that have come in, but we'll just choose one of them for now, and then hopefully, Maureen, when you're back in the studio, we can answer some of the others. From Jade Goodwin in Ingle. And one of the questions is, can diabetes affect your fertility and mojo? That's a lovely way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely.
I thought that was a nice way to round this little spot off.
I love that. Affect fertility. Only in the fact, in so much as if you control when ladies are trying to get pregnant, what we usually suggest is that we actually ask them to go to preconception clinics, which is run by the obs and gynae people, and the nurses the diabetes nurses can do it as well. And basically, what we do is we get the control as tight as we possibly can, because when you actually then do become pregnant, your control really does have to be as near normal as possible, because you're not only protecting the mother, you're also protecting the child that she's carrying. Regarding fertility, oh no, you've said that's fertility. Mojo. Well, that also, I think, depends on your control and also depends on the person. I don't necessarily think that diabetes will have an effect if your control is not very good, but if you lack mojo, then I don't think the diabetes is going to change your mojo. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Maureen, a pleasure having you back in the studio this morning. Can I thank everyone who sent questions in? And if we've not had time to answer all of them, hopefully when Maureen's back with us, we can go through the questions we missed this morning. And of course, anybody listening can contact us at studio@preston.fm if you have a question for Maureen. And again, your website
is www.diabetescompletecareuk.com. And anytime there's an email post on there, anytime you've got a question, doesn't have to be for the radio show, more than happy to answer them. So please do send them in. Thank you.
Brilliant. And as I say, Maureen, can I thank you for coming in this morning?
Thanks for listening to our podcasts. But don't forget, Chat City is live weekdays from 10 till noon on 103.2 Preston FM.